evening. My name's Larry Robin. I'm the director of the Moonstone Art Center. The Moonstone Art Center produces 80-plus poetry readings a year and 2 citywide history festivals. The history festivals are called Hidden History because they're on people you never heard of, but you should have, which is why we do festivals about it. The 80 poetry readings include a monthly program here at Phillycam called Mentor and Mentored. And what we do with this series is look at that relationship between a teacher and a student, a workshop leader and the workshop attendees. You know, there's a magic that takes place in how art can be transferred from generation to generation. You know, good art, no matter what the style, is honesty, which means bearing your soul. You know, how do you teach someone to bare their soul, to expose themselves to the world about issues, about their visions, about what they believe and feel? I mean, I think it's magic. Of course, it's done, so it can't quite be magic. It's reality as well. This is our 13th program, and our mentor this evening is Pat McLean. She's a performance poet, a teaching artist who's facilitated workshops at Temple University for the Mastery and Universal Charter Schools, for the Department of Human Services, the United Way, and others. She's a teaching artist with the Woodmere Art Museum and the Philadelphia Department of Parks and Recreation. She is the author of 3 books, has won awards, including from the Leeway Foundation, which is a great organization. Pat McLean's poetry can be found in several anthologies: Life Spaces from Seasoned Sisters, Check the Rhyme, and For Women, a tribute to Nina Simone, which is a wonderful book, which you should get. Everything in it is just terrific. Apiary Literary Magazine, and more Life Spices for Seasoned Sisters. I'll leave the rest of the program in Pat's hands. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. Well, good evening, everyone. First off, I'd like to say I'm extremely excited and honored to be invited to be a part of this program. As Larry mentioned, I do facilitate workshops and classes, but I've coined the name. I like to call them sharing shops, because even as a mentor or as an instructor or teacher, I'm learning just as much as I try to share and give to my students. So I'd like to share a poem with you guys, if you don't mind, before I go on. And usually, as a performance poet, I used to memorize everything. I don't do that so much anymore because I'm not performing like I used to, but I still write a lot. And so I like to start off by sharing a poem. It's entitled No Way Out. And I'm going to read from this paper because a woman that I admire and love very, very much told myself and my very dear friend Deborah Powell Wright and I, we were somewhere seeing her, that the paper is your friend. You can always count on the paper. Don't be afraid of it. You don't have to memorize it. So I'm going to look to my friend and read this poem. A poem woke me up this morning, following me from my bed into the bath, begging me to give it form, but I did not feel the want to write. So I splashed cold water on my face, attempting to freeze it in its tracks. But poems can be persistent. I wipe away the wetness only to see words all over my towel, willing me to jot them down before they dry and fade, but I do not feel the need to write. I continue to ready myself, moving hurriedly around images, past phrases, ahead of any memories that might manipulate my mood, since I do not feel the desire to write. But you cannot suppress a poem. Foolishly, I think that I have outthought it, as the demands of the day drag me towards its end, and I am recalling some random acts of indifference peopled upon my person in a tiny space of just a 8-hour workday, and I am left wondering why. As I enter my home, sitting there at my table, waiting with pen and pad, is poem, and suddenly, because I cannot repress a poem, I feel the urgent desire and the urgent need to write. Thank you. Thank you. And I wanted, thank you, yes. Yes. Right. That's my cue when I do the.
Let's do it the right way.
Well, as the program is entitled Mentors and Mentees, and at first when I thought about it, I'm like, am I a mentee or mentor? I don't really think of myself as that. I just think of myself as someone who's, because I'm learning as I go along. I'm learning these words. I'm learning this poetry life, which, by the way, is just such a major part of who I am. It's my balance with my work life and everything else. Without that, I would topple over. So it helps me stay level. So I'm honored that I get a chance to share this, not just with young adults, but I also share my sharing shops with young children, because age has poetry and art has no limit, and there's no cutoff place for it. So I do a lot of that, and it's just such an honor for me to be able to do that. And I met these two young ladies that are sitting here with me. I met Ali, which would have been well over 10, 15 years ago. I was part of a poetry ensemble called In the Company of Poets, and we were, Deborah Powell and I wanted to just do more than perform, because when we were performing the poetry and we were like, quote unquote, building a name for ourselves and getting a following, it felt like something was missing. It felt like that God had given us this, these wonderful words and this wonderful power to share it, that it didn't feel right to not share it with someone else. And so we became a part of, we joined the PASEP program, the Pan African American Community Education Program at Temple University, where we started teaching poetry workshops. And Ali was one of the first members to join our class. So I'm going to ask Ali to talk a little bit about her experience of being in the company of poets in our class at PASEP. Miss Ali.
Thank you. It's also a privilege and an honor and a blessing to be here and to be with everyone today, especially since poetry is something also very near and dear to my heart. So I guess for you guys to know, to tell a little bit about the story, is that I started writing poetry when I was about 8 years old. It was the way that I expressed myself when I couldn't speak to anyone else. Mm-hmm. Growing up as a bit nerdy, bit geeky, kind of in the band kind of stuff, and didn't always fit in. I always felt like I fit in with poetry. Yes. So the first time that I had actually performed any poetry was actually in college at Shippensburg University. And that was the first time that I had actually shared something publicly. For all that time, I had kept that talent and to myself. And when that happened, it was kind of like an explosion on the inside about, wow, you just blessed all these people with your words and things like that. And that feeling about, being able to express myself and have others identify with that, it kind of changed my world about how I felt about poetry. Well, when it came to years later, being a part of the PASEP program and meeting my wonderful teachers, because they were teachers to me, in the PASEP program, it was, I was looking for something. I was looking to reconnect myself, but I felt like at that point I had nothing to write about. And I don't know if anybody's ever felt like that writer's block moment. I wrote about love, I wrote about anger, I wrote about sadness, all those kind of things.
Of course we did.
And, you get to that point where I'm just like, I'm avoiding the pen and paper because I'm saying it all again. And I was looking for a way to re-energize that. So I had actually taken 2 classes, and one was more specifically for performance poetry and practicing and stuff. And I'm like, Miss Pat, I still stick to the paper, it's my friend. But in the class with Miss Pat and Miss Deb was called Poetry Pulls Pain, and the name itself drew my attention to that class in a way that I was like, that's surely what it does. What am I gonna learn in this class? And I ended up meeting a wonderful group of sisters, because we became sisters in that class that transcended over all these years. So the and it was so nice to be so included in that sisterhood because I was the only Latina in that particular group. But it was not a fear of not being understood with my Spanglish style, because I do use Spanish and English in my poetry. It was more about find a way to make it flourish and use your style to express these kind of topics that we were discussing week by week. And it was, let me tell you, I lived down the street from Temple. I hustled my little behind to class on time every time because I just enjoyed that forum, that sisterhood, that safe place to be expressing poetry. And I'm quite proud of the poems that I wrote in that class because I was so encouraged, and it was so different from some of the stuff that I had written when I'm in my younger days, you know. It was expressing myself, but on a whole other, more adult level. And I'll always remember the one particular class, Miss Pat brought in a statue, a sculpture, and she said, write about this. And it was a very kind of adult, kind of sexual thing going on with that sculpture, and that's what came out in that poem. And I remember I named it Good Old Love from Brazil because it was where she had actually gotten the sculpture. And that was so fun to write and so fun to express. And I really have to say that, you know, with these ladies, I learned so much, not only about myself and actually practicing the written and spoken word and learning the diameters and haikus and things like that, but also just taking it to that other level about, okay, we can write about love, but let's bring it to this part. Or we can talk about hurt and anger, but let's take it to this part. And then the collaboration that we also had ended up being. So I have some displays here. So this was from our class. And what made me really particularly proud about this is this is the name of my poem, I Am Poet Free. And that was such a proud moment for me that they had chosen the name of my poem to be the cover of the booklet that we produced from our class. So I will be reading to you I Am Poet Free. But before that, I wanted to show you also that after that class, we were able to collaborate, and I drew the cover of our next book, which it spoke to the sisterhood to me, and I was so inspired by what we were doing. It was a second version of Another Woman Thing. And, you know, of course it had the Latina flavor because I was in it. So in that sense, you know, me being feeling accepted and being able to write and being able to perform and to work together with all these wonderful women was just really, truly inspiring, and another proud moment that they chose my drawing to be the cover.
Yes.
So I'm going to read to you today I Am Poet Free from the first book, and then I'm going to read to you a poem near and dear to my heart from the second book, and I'll get to that. But this is I Am Poet Free. Yo soy Alida, a woman, lover, imagining days of affection, linguistically evident, not existent above maiden monikers. I am Papi, Anna, Danny, innately loving, looking for Ali. Soy Spanglish that flips over sentences como fish out of water. Borinqueñaness. Soy la poeta, giving life back to that fish. Freedom in my tongue, como me sales, words drip eloquently. Tú nunca sabes. Poet free. When words come to mind, then I must find a pencil in time to write, refine. Poet free. Looking down at the paper, recalling each intimate caper, can't be holding off until later. There are feelings here to savor. Poet free. With each linking phrase, images jump off the page, be it humble, love, lonely, or rage. It grows up to become the next stage. Poet free. The sun runs next to me. The river billows lovingly. The earth enviously envelops me. The stories have become invitingly, poet-free. I am poet-free.
Yes.
So with that, if you had known my work from before, I had grown leaps and bounds in doing that poem in such a different way, and playing with words and the alliteration and using my name down the side through the whole throughout the poem. It was just such a wonderful learning experience in that sense. So with the second book, which we, so I can show you the cover, right? See, that's me, right? We ended up, the collaborative that worked together, ended up wanting more, you know, and we were just so connected and just loving the things that came out of that particular program, that we said, no, we can't just leave it at this. We're just not ending. We're not just graduating. What's the next? What's the next step? And I remember a lot of us felt that way. And they had done Another Woman Thing, which was a poetic play, with the third party, that Oni, and she's awesome too. She plays the instruments and stuff like that, gets into it, and I really appreciate that part of her as well, because it brought another whole other element when you bring the music into it. You know, I'm surprised y'all don't have your maracas and tambourines here today with us, but we explored about women and womanhood in that particular poetic play, and all the different elements that that women have in today's world. And I think that going from things that happened in our past to what is it like in the future, like what are we at work, that play, as nerve-wracking and as many practices as we had, and being really nervous about all of it, I think people really walked away with, wow, that was such a good sisterhood thing that happened up there. And with that, one of the another proud poem that came out of that was recognizing my grandmother and giving tribute to my grandmother, and how important her history and her lessons are instilled in me today, and including the Spanish for me in particularly. And also thinking about just to now coming back to the present a little bit, how a lot of us might have lost our grandmothers and stuff like that. And you know, when I read this the other day, I was thinking about that. That you know, some of my friends right now are going through a difficult time because they might be losing someone they love that's been around for a long time. My grandmother passed away at 92. You know, that's a long life to share and impart
Mine
with.
was 96.
Yeah, so
she just passed.
this poem really gives tribute to my Puerto Ricanness, but also her and the wisdom that she imparted with me. So this one was called Abuelita, which means grandmother in Spanish. Well, little grandmother, Abuelita. Abuelita, you are my guiding luz. You brighten my dark paths so that I can see wisdom in each step. Abuelita, you are my favorite tocadisco. Your comforting sound soothes my inner worries, note by note. Abuelita, you are my colcha. Your consejos keep me warm, wrapping around me in the stillness of morning. Abuelita, you are my pilón. You pound away garlic, reminding me of tough love, y que viviendo es luchando. Abuelita, bendición. So that's Abuelita. And before I make a mess, I'd like to just wrap up and say that, you know, it was really just a wonderful experience working with Ms. Pat and the other ladies of the class. Our relationship has spanned that many years. It's amazing to me still. And it's a good feeling to have good friends and good sisterhood and being involved in positive things. And if anybody who has ever put a pen to paper knows that creative juice, when it starts going and it starts rolling and you are in a community where you're celebrated and people enjoy that creative process, you get invigorated, and you want more. And I'm glad that I've been around you ladies to enjoy more and continue to do more, because I was also a part of the collaboration in for women. It was a challenge to me because it was my first short story, but true to my Borinqueña-ness, I made sure that I wrote a story that was relatable to everyone, but also, in my story in that book was more about a part of growing up and what it's like to be in that world of growing up between an old school world of what it's like on the island in Puerto Rico, and seeing things and experiencing things as a young person. So I really hope that you guys do get a chance to read that book, because there's really lots of great stories in that book, not just mine, but
That's right.
But I just really, she might not say she's a mentor, or Miss Deb. They might say also that, we're sisters, but they really helped me to grow in my poetry, and I'm really grateful for that. And I thank you so much, because without you, I would not have been at this level, and enjoying more, and anytime an opportunity comes up, not being afraid of being on call and saying, yes, I will.
Yes. Thank you.
So thank you, Ms. Pat. I love you guys.
I love
you
you
very much.
Before I introduce our next amazing poet, I will sort of feed off a little bit of what Ali said. We have become, to me, more than friends. We are truly, all of us, sisters. We're connected to each other. Whenever something comes up, we think about each other. And it's amazing to me, the power of poetry. The things that I've been able to accomplish in my life, a lot of it is because of poetry. The people that are in my life, the people that I've met, is because poetry. Even to think about it, I'm overwhelmed. And kind of like Ali was, I was like a closet poet. I've been writing poems forever. Even my mom has little rhymes that I wrote, I don't remember them, but she was like, you were always running around, like you get mad at somebody, you can make a little rhyme up about them. That's my style. I mean, that's my style of writing. I'm more of a freestyle poet. I just write it out, and then I go back and structure it, which is kind of what I've learned over the years, and what helps me teach in my sharing shops. And I have to go back up a little bit, and again, and if you hear me say Deborah Powell's name a lot, it's because she took this journey with me a lot, and because we started out taking a class at Pass Up under Dr. Regina Jennings, and her class was New Black Voices, and I believe that was like in the 90s or like the late 80s or 90s when that class started, and we met in that class writing together, and we actually we grew into a great friendship, and without either of us knowing it, our teacher entered our poems into a contest, Sonia Sanchez, Audre Lorde contest. We didn't even know we were in it, and then to be notified that we won a contest that we didn't know we were in, and not only that, we were going to actually get to meet Sonia Sanchez because the contest was in honor to her. It was just like, it was an amazing thing for us. And ever since then, we have poetically and sister-friendly, we have been inseparable, and that is because of poetry. So I always like to tell people that words have amazing power. They have the power to, yes, they do have the power to hurt, because we've all experienced that, but just the power to heal, and the power to connect, the power to change, the power to grow, the power in words is just amazing. And poetry, for me, is just a way to shape and structure it. Like some people can write, I do short stories too, but writing short stories for me is an extremely hard thing to do. Poetry, I can just, it just flows off my tongue because it's just inside of me to do. And so that's kind of what got us on the path also, because of what Dr. Jennings instilled in us as Black writers, that the title said Young Black Writers, but that was more of a pull into the class. It was about learning to express yourself as a person, not as a Black person, not as a woman, but as a person. And she taught us that in that class, and we were able to take some of the things that we learned and add a little bit of our own to it and just move forward with it. So moving forward, I'm going to share another poem. This is actually, again, the award that Deborah and I won was the Beamer Sonia Sanchez Literary Award, and we were also asked to be put into a book with Dr. Sanchez, and this was done by a dear friend of ours who passed away about 2 years ago. Doctor, and I'm going to cry because she was just such an amazing person, Dr. Delancey. She taught at, she had just like a brilliant mind. Like, this woman was amazing, and she cared so much about her people and the history that she just really, I don't even know what to say about it. But anyway, she asked us to be a part of this, and we were really fighting her on this, and we're like, we're legends and legacies, we're not neither one, but
She saw it for
yes,
you. She saw it
did,
for you.
and she saw it in us, and to be a part of this was just a major thing. It was, and also our teacher, Dr. Regina Jennings, was also in this. So it was also kind of like a mentors and mentees all up in this book right here. That's really what it was. And so I actually wrote a poem in tribute to Sonia Sanchez, and tell me a poet who hasn't, but who hasn't written one. If you haven't, you will be. And I'd like to, I'd like to share this poem that I wrote for her before I introduce our next writer.
If I may say, her birthday is today.
Yes, Sonia Sanchez's birthday is today.
Happy birthday, Sonia
Yes.
Sanchez. We heart you.
Yes. And this is called For Sonia. I will say, a lot of times when I teach workshops and classes, and people always ask me, well, should I write from my title, or should I write from the poem? Should I write the poem first, or should I write the title first? And my line, what I always say is, you write what's in your heart and in your head first. The title will come, the shape and the body of the poem, but you have to write what you're feeling, what you want to say. So I'm going to read real quick. For Sonia. I, a young woman, woke up one day feeling the need to say something about my neighborhood, my family, me. Only problem was, didn't know what or how to say it. So I walked, ran, raced in search of someone, something to show me how to release the words tangled in my thoughts, matted in my mind, struggling for existence. When one day I found myself standing in front of a bookstore. Don't even know how I got there yet. There I was, staring at a bright red bomb, looking back at me, exploding all through me, beckoning me into its bright red light. Home girls and hand grenades is what it said. Read every word, ate it up, devoured it like it was a piece of my mama's fried chicken. It gave me an appetite, a hunger to know this author, this poet, this Sonia. So I began to feed off of her. She became my homecoming, and because I've been a woman too, under a soprano sky, I made a sound investment in my own thoughts. My words began to form love poems of self, of family, of community. I could feel Sonia's song, and through her, I came to know we be a bad people. I began to move to the rhythm of my own magic, and like the singing coming off the drums, the music of my ancestors began to move through me. I could hear the motion still. Having swallowed this sister, this Sonia, I questioned these emotions, taking up residence in my thoughts. I soon began to doubt myself. Could I, would I, this new word warrior, having been wounded in the house of a friend, also survive? But as I began to digest Sonia's song, the answer became apparent. My spirit, like my people, can survive anything. And I knew that even the echoes of outsiders shouting, "Does your house have lions?" into my soul could not silence the sound or stagger the motion of Sister Sonia's words as they moved through me, pushing my own thoughts into the light. So, on that note, I'm going to introduce our next amazing poet, and this is Christina. Christina also took my class in at PASSEP, and I have to tell the story about Christina because Debbie will understand. With Dr. Regina Jennings, I took her class like 8 times. Like, she would look up and she was like, why do you keep taking this class? Because she taught me so much, and I just felt like I never got over learning from her. And I'm proud to say that Christina has taken my workshop more than once. She don't know how proud she made me to see her come in. At first you get a feel like, well, wow, did I do a bad job? Does she have to come back? But then no. But no, when she returned, I got that wonderful feeling. I've got to know her as well as just a sweet, kind young woman, giving, caring, talented writer, Miss Christina Atkinson. You like that intro, didn't you?
Yes. Good evening, everyone. My name is Christina. If you ever see my writing, you'll see it spelled as Crystal, which is Krystle. I had the privilege of studying under Miss Pat McLean for maybe 2 semesters at PASSUP. Mr. Rogers was the director. I've taken classes with Bill Holmes and also with Farron and Dove. But Miss Pat was by far my favorite. She was so relational. She was very compassionate in what she did. She taught us how to write tankas, haikus, anything that we never heard of. She was honest with it. I would be awake for the first half of the class. This is my running joke. I worked like 12 hours a day, and then I would go to class at night. And I would be awoke for the first half of the day, first half of the class, and if we had a break, you could forget. I'd be over in the cut and knocked out sleep. But no matter what, at the end of the class, I always was alert, like what's next? So it was my pleasure to be in her class. I met a lot of wonderful people who are doing different things. I'm so surprised. A lot of my professors from PASSUP are just blossoming, not surprised, but just like, oh, they're not there anymore. What are they doing? But I'm so grateful that you thought of me. It was really my honor and privilege to do this with you. I actually have. I'm not like Ali. I'm not gonna hold y'all. I don't know where my chapbook is, but I happen to have one of my little paper flowers in the archives in my computer, and this was like a play on words, and it was using imagery. It started out being about a cat, and then it took some turns and some twists. God only knows what happened, but it's titled Black Beauty, and it's a play on words, a play upon color and whatnot. So once again, it's Black Beauty. Black Beauty screams in horror all through the night. Memories so vividly horrific taunt her. Black Beauty purrs as her eyes glisten in the sunlight. By day, she walks regal like Egyptian Queen Hatshepsut. Night terrorizes her. She scurries while shivering in the gleam of moonlight. Black Beauty was forever objectified by the color of her skin. Her portrayal reviewed as no poignancy within. She teeter-totters, trying to be teachable as she is, swiftly swept away in the solace of sweet love. The gentle sway of her hips, seductive curvature of her lips, Black Beauty walks those mean streets, confident by day, shiftless at night. Black Beauty had it all, youthful, brilliant, and talented, too blind to see that her black too is beautiful. Whether the color ebony, mahogany, or amethyst, she could never realize that when night fell, the game of pretend was over. No use of trying to reinvent herself over and over again. Removing the mask of makeup, hair, accessories, clothing, she acquiesced that she too was beautiful inside and out. Her black is beautiful.
Yes.
Okay, so since my days at PASSUP, my professors challenged me to return to academia. Now, mind you, when I was a student at PASSUP, I had already turned 30 plus. So I decided to go on back to academia with these babies. And now I'm still not yet 40, but past 30 plus. And these kids are giving me a run for my money. But I'm proud to say I'm knocking them out the box with my GPA. But if I didn't learn anything, I learned that you have to believe in yourself. You have to encourage yourself. You have to believe in your higher power that you can make it no matter what your obstacle is, no matter what life's challenges you face, you still have to keep it moving. So with that said, I have this poem that I did at my first PASSUP closing, I think it was, with Bill Holmes. And this is called I Will Not Apologize. And this was written kind of in the same spirit as Maya Angelou's Phenomenal Woman, not to compare, but to kind of contrast. It goes, I will not apologize for who I am. I will not apologize for who I be. I will not apologize for who I have become. Only I can perform the arduous task of being me. I will not ignore the gifts that I have just to hang in your spotlight. I refuse to be your inconvenience. I will not apologize for being me. I will not apologize for being PHAT, pretty, hot, articulate, and thoughtful. I will not allow myself to be contained in your box. I will not apologize for the woman that I have become. I will not apologize for bruising your ego. I will not apologize for being a woman of standard. I will not apologize for the decisions that I made, nor will I apologize for the events that have occurred. For what has not killed me only made me stronger. With every tear that I cried, I was no longer weak, simply stronger. I will not apologize for who I am. I will not apologize for who I be. I will not apologize for the woman I have become. I am free to spread these wings. I triumph. I am confident that nobody, absolutely nobody, can perform the arduous task of being me.
Right on.
So that was my closing, and then I took Miss Pat again, and the whole time that I was taking Miss Pat, mind you, I was a part of a collective, and we were doing stuff, and I had projects, and I didn't like the projects I had to do, and a lot of projects had to deal with, you know, memorization. I'm so over memorization right now. I am taking like 9 credits SCCP, working. I don't have time for memorization right now. So I say that to say that, yes, the paper, the folder, the binder, the computer, the printer, it's all my friend.
Yeah.
So speaking of friends, I had a friend that was a poet, and he battled with cancer. He passed away in last December. He was a father. He had a 13-year-old child. He was just an all-around great guy. He performed at events such as the Asian Arts Initiative, Just Words, and also the Mount Airy Day. I don't know if some of you may know him. His name was Smite 9. So here it goes. It's called Remembering Superman. My poetic brother, Smite 9, proudly sported that S on his chest. He was handsome, humble, and proud to be a father, a brother, and a poet. Smite could move rooms using vivid imagery and mesmerizing chemistry with mere words. He was an avid photographer, an accomplished author, and a poet whose talents were showcased at various events around Philadelphia. He challenged me to think outside of the box and to use my tools, my mind, my paper, my pens, to create masterpieces of poetry. Velazio was charismatic, charming, humane, and supportive. He loved his life, his family, and his Lord. I remember him doing a photo shoot for the women of Wings of Worth, and everything just had to be so perfect. He got on my last nerve with it. He directed us, positioned us for many photos at a time. He even sprang into action to catch me as I was falling at the Clef Club in South Philly. It was in his ginormous, muscular arms that I sought solace on the anniversary of my mother's passing. It was through his steering rendition of Even Me, I gained the strength to move forward and pursue my dreams. Just 4 short years ago, we were sitting, talking, busting it up. Now, I bid him adieu. He was a gifted, viral friend and poet who was an inspiration to many. I remember attending his homegoing and repast among artists, family, and friends, and having a still pen for a moment. It was so much that I wanted to say, so much that I wanted to do, so much that I needed to write. And I never told him how much his encouragement, laughter, and support mattered. I thought there would always be another day, another moment, another event. I never thought that there was another angel in my midst. In these months since he's been away, I have learned to reminisce. I'm able to find peace knowing that it was simply God's plan for him. I pray for his family and for our poetic family that somehow we can honor his legacy. I smile knowing that he transitioned peacefully up, and away as a superman. Rest in paradise, Velazio Afinador Pagan. I think I got a problem over here. I have one more piece, and it is about my grandfather. I don't know how many of you grandfathers are still living, but my grandfather was about 77 when I was born. And when I say he took care of me, he took care of me, and I was a problem. I was the baby's baby. and the baby of the family and the everything. And my grandfather would get up, make me breakfast, did everything but put me down at night. But when I say that he was my everything, he was my everything. So this poem is entitled Para Mi Abuelo, for my grandfather. Into me, I see you, towering over me like a majestic oak tree, tickling the sun's rays. It is cold out. I am bundled up. You extend your mammoth, pecan brown hand outward. I reach up to grasp it. We began our morning walk around the perimeter of our neighborhood. Your hands are warm and withered, but I feel their warmth, and I'm convinced that it's the warmth of the sun. He was an old man, I a young girl. He never hesitated to take care of me. He made me breakfast, scrambled eggs with ketchup, hot buttered toast with jelly, fried spam, and orange drink. We ate and we drank with bellies filled. We shared their rickety faux leather rocking chair. While watching Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, we took a little siesta just before the electric company came on. Into me, I see him as I gaze at the sun. Charismatic, genuine, erudite. Everything I learned about business and service began with his teachings. I feel the wind nudging me forward. I walk the perimeter of our old neighborhood years later, and I feel your midnight blue eyes winking at me. I feel your rigid high cheekbones upon my sun-kissed caramel brown skin. Into me, I see you distributing gentle strength to your beloved and only granddaughter. You're reaching out to me, whispering, Pud, it's going to be okay. You'll see. I look to the sun. I see you in the horizon of my gate. I look up, smiling, knowing that he has finally come to say goodbye. My towering, gentle oak tree came to bid me adieu. You served our country and family without ever complaining. Sir, I salute you. Rest in the sweet liberty of peace.
So I'm watching.
Okay.
I don't know if the signal means.
So keep going.
Keep
Keep
it going.
going.
Okay, good. All right, good.
Keep going.
Keep talking.
Keep going.
So can you tell we've never done poets? It's not usual to tell a poet to keep talking because that's what we do. Are you done? I'm going to interrupt you.
So basically, a lot of my work is very autobiographical. Some of it is fictitious. I write short stories most of the time. My poetry has always been about real life. I fell in love with poetry when I was in junior high school. It's a coincidence. Somebody mentioned a book, Continuing Black Voices or something. Mm-hmm. Like, I read Black Voices in junior high school. My teacher was very much Black power. Mm-hmm. And I loved Black Voices. So I wrote this poem called Somebody's Hero when I was like 12, and it got featured into the yearbook. And I mean, this was my very first published work. And everybody was like, ha ha, her poem is in the yearbook, ha ha. I was like, ha ha, nothing. Like, I worked on that. But it was so funny because I just, I'm just writing what I feel, Right. And I don't think that it's necessarily, publication worthy, but it made it. Mm-hmm. And that was my first inkling that, I probably had what it took to be a poet. Mm-hmm. In that time, I lost my mother when I was 16. I studied at Eastern University. I've studied at PASSEP. Now I'm back at CCP, studying to get my associates in early childhood education and my certificate in creative writing. But what I've learned throughout it all is that your first love will always be your first love. Mm-hmm. So if you are a writer and you just wrote a couple words in a book and left it there, that you can always go back to those same couple words and add a couple lines, yes. And that you can keep it moving, and then maybe you'll have a folder together, or maybe you'll have a book. So I say that to say that no matter what happens, everybody has a little inner poet in them. Yes. Everybody has a little inner poet. Yes. They might call it a journal. They might call it their little angry rant, whatever you want to call it. But I'm so grateful and so thankful to have had the privilege of being under the wings of Miss Pat, being under the wings of Miss Farrell Dove, that it made me broaden my horizon and not be scared to go back. Mm-hmm. It made me not be scared to share. Like, I'm not somebody that likes to be mic'd up. I don't like to be in front of a camera. You know, I don't like to get all fixed up, but, you know, I do what I had to do, you know, when duty calls.
You did it well.
Thank you. So I'm just so grateful to be in this room with these faces, and, you know, maybe I'll see you again, maybe not, but thank you for the opportunity and the privilege.
Thank you. I would like to, again, piggyback off of Christine, if I may. It's like when you hear a conversation, you hear things, and it sort of helps jog your memory. One of the things that I talk about in my workshops, whether it's children or adults, I've had people come in and say, well, I don't know how to write a poem. And I'm not a poet. I've never written a poem before. And I always make this statement, and when I say it, I mean it. When you leave here, you will be a poet. When you leave this class, when you leave this workshop, you will be, because she's right. It's in all of us. It's, the poetry isn't, you live poetry every day. I mean, it's all around you. You speak it a lot of times, and you don't even know that you're saying it. You know, these are, and just the things that I share in the workshops are, which I'm learning too. I learned structure, you know, different styles of poetry, different forms. Those are things that I try to share, to put into the poetry, because the writers already come into the class as, they already come in as writers. They already come in as poets, because everybody, every human being has a story to tell, and whether you tell it in a short story, whether you tell it in your sculpture, whether you tell it in your paintings, whether you tell it in your poetry, it's in there. And so what I'm proud to have been able to do is to allow other people to bring what's in there out. And so that also, again, helps me to grow, because I'm always going to be growing. I've never want to be at a point where I say, well, I arrived. And it's funny, because when you hear someone read your bio, or you hear someone say things about you, and you're like, you sometimes you're looking like, is that, is she talking about me? I did all of that, or I'm doing all of that, but I don't think about that. I just think about the fact that I have an opportunity to share poetry, if I could. And this is a story, because again, I tell you, I teach poetry to young people, and so I was doing a workshop at the Woodmere Art Museum, and what they do is that on a day of poetry, they bring a lot of children in from different schools, and that on any given time, I could have like 400 kids in front of me, and we have to do it real quick, because you know, with children, you don't. There's no downtime. You can't think about anything. You better keep them moving, and you better keep it going. So I had this, and I don't know, it just came Johnny on the spot. I came with this idea, like, we're gonna write about colors, and I'm gonna pull some colors out, and you tell me the first thing you see, what that color reminds you of, and I'm moving real fast, and I'm getting hyped, because I'm going along as I do myself. Well, at the end of the workshop, they wrote this wonderful poem, and the little boy came up to me, he says, "You're like the Pied Piper of poetry." I mean, that was like the best compliment. Because he came in all like, I don't want to write no stinking poetry. At the end of the workshop, I was so overwhelmed and so filled up that he was so proud of his little piece of paper that he walked out, that I knew. Sometimes you get this thing like, is this, I don't want to, I'm tired, I don't want to do, but when you see that, it's all worth it. So I even get that sometimes from adults. They're like, no, I don't know, I can't write poetry. But one thing, and Christine will tell you this, because she used to always say in the class, Miss Pat, because I come up with a stack of work, we got some work to do up in this workshop. We're going to learn structure, we're going to learn style, we're going to learn. I gave homework, I had in-class lessons, because to me, if you're growing in the art, then you have to work at it. And a lot of times, especially with poetry, and I don't want to make it sound like it's other poets are trivial, but if you're not working at your art, it's an art that you constantly have to work at. If you're a musician, you're working on your instruments. If you're an artist, you're painting. If you're singing, you're working on your voice. If you're a writer, you're working on your writing of your story. Poets have to work at their craft. You have to work at it, and you have to read other writers. You have to come outside of the box. You can't just get stuck into reading. Like I mentioned, that we took New Black Voices, but that doesn't mean that I only want to read about black poets. One thing that's the common denominator in all of this is that we're all human beings, and I've learned as I grow in this poetry thing and in this writing thing that even though we're all different culturally, you know, and different genders or whatever, we all have a common, we all go through the same things. No matter where we are in the world, no matter what we're doing, no matter where we live, we all have some of the very same experiences. And that's what poetry allows us to bring out. So I will encourage you, even if you don't write poetry or read poetry from other cultures, from other, it's amazing. You'll be like, this woman went through the same thing I went through. She's on the other side of the world. I didn't know she had these same kind of problems. Or this man is doing the same things I'm going through. These things happen, and that's what I like about poetry. It just opens up the whole world for you. For me, it does anyway. And I would encourage you. You don't have to like it. I'm not really into poetry, but if you're into music and if you're into songs, if you're into words, then somehow it will come into you. Somehow.
Now, would you say something about the 4 women?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. 4 Women is a collective which Miss Deborah Powell, right? Again, she invited us as writers and poets to present our work to her, or to give it to her so she could look through it and put this collective together it's not about Nina Simone per se, but it's sort of about the things that she felt, or her ideas, sort of her concepts. And so we all submitted stories, and it's actually Deborah was the one who really went through it to know how to piece it together. You know, to us it's just our story individually, but she's the one to actually put it together to make it into a wonderful collective that it is. It has short stories, not from women, and Deborah can explain this better than I can, not just from the United States, but from other countries as well. Short stories and poetry, and again, like Ali was saying, it has, for me, it has made me grow leaps and bounds to be a part of such a wonderful collective, because again, for me, I'm more in my poetry box. Like, you can talk to me about poetry and I can take you anywhere in the world with it, but when you start talking about writing and stories, I feel a little boxed and closed in. But Deborah allowed me, reading the book made me feel like I was part of something wonderful. So that's what the 4, and I'm gonna ask Deborah to talk a little bit more about it, because it actually is her collective, and we are going around together sharing the stories from the collective. We sort of on like a tour. when we were in the company of poets, we used to say it was the Chitlin Circuit, and those of you who are a little bit older, y'all know what that means. But now we're on tour with the 4 Women Collective, and again, it's a wonderful thing to be a part of. Ali and I are also included in that. So that's what she means by we have continued to grow sisterly and artistically because of the workshops that we've taken together.
4 women.
Yes.
Yeah, so I received a grant from the Leeway Foundation because I had this idea, and speaking of sisterhood, I actually 2 years before had submitted an essay to a collection of essays that a professor was doing at the University of Delaware. And it was a 2-year process, and just seriously, I was ready to give up. Like, I couldn't do this. This was my first time, and I reached out to her. I had not met her. We were doing this by email. And I said, you know, God help me. And she said, and God will. And from there, I kind of got rejuvenated. So to make that long story short, she gave me something, you know. So I'm in this collection of stories, and I wanted to do the same thing for other sisters. And so I got this idea to apply to the Leeway Foundation, and I received a grant, and then I put out a call for papers, and you know, I met a woman in, I believe it was Antigua. I can't remember right now, but it was in Antigua, and she was part of a collection, a collective, a group of women who they got together to you know, read other books. And she said, well, I know some poets and some writers. I said, well, great, send it to them. So it really does include women from all over the world, women of Jamaican descent, women of Guyanese descent, women, I guess they call them Afro-Caribbean, or however they self-identify. But women of color. And as Pat said, it's not just about Nina Simone. It is inspired really by the song For Women by Nina Simone that talks about the color of our skin and the texture of our hair. And so I call them love and struggle stories. You know, about relationships, about how relationships, not just men and women, but women and women, or mother and father, or sister and brother, and so, what are those challenges as people of color? And I also want to say, Ali, I just love her, because when I put out the call and I sent it to people that I know, Darlene included, Darlene's in the collection, and she wrote me an email and she said, I want to make sure that, I'm giving you what you want, because initially I said African or African American, and she's a Latina, right? And so, she wanted to make sure that she was not trying to jump into something that was not for her. And so we had dialogue. I said, well, what would be the proper term to be inclusive? What would make you feel, like you are included? Because I want you to do it. Like, you're my sister. I want you to be in this. And so we came up with women of color would be the appropriate terminology. So as Pat said, we're kind of sort of on tour. We have a reading actually at the Kelly Writers House coming up on September 29th, Monday, September 29th. It's a similar situation as this, and I think about 7 or 8 of us will be reading on that evening, so you're all welcome to come. And thank you for allowing me to express that. Thank you.
Wonderful version of Mississippi Goddamn.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And I do want to say, in Pat's reading of the song of the poem for Sonia Sanchez, embedded in that poem are the titles of all of her books,
Yes.
which is really neat. So we're about there. Just want to thank our poets tonight. Thank Pat and thank our
Thank you.
mentees, and thank you all for being here. And let's give everyone another big hand.
I know we're wrapping up, but before we do, if it's okay if I say one last thing, I would also like to please give Larry Robbins a round of applause and thank him, because I can say, honestly, when he had Robbins Bookstore, he gave poets like myself, he gave us a chance to share our work when no other bookstore would. Like, man, get out of here with that little folded piece of stuff. Get on out of here with that. Larry would let us express ourselves in his store, so he really does deserve the applause, and even allowing us to, he's still helping and sharing and giving back, and that's what it's all about. So I'm so honored to know him and so honored to be a part of this, and so thank you all very much.